happen. I just said,
we're gonna have a good day. And all my homies gonna ride today.
that's right.
And all these mommies look fly.
Hi everyone, it's been a while since I last posted a video, but I've gotten a lot of people reaching out about what the technical interview is like to get into App Academy or one of these boot camps. So today I thought I'd give you guys an example of an App Academy mock interview that I'm going to give to my brother, who's a Microsoft engineer. So maybe you guys can see how he solves the problem, and you'll get a good idea for the level of coding ability that it takes to get into one of these boot camps.
Each problem, you're going to have a maximum of 15 minutes to solve this problem. I'm going to paste it here, and why don't you give it a read and let me know if you have any questions. And
sounds good. Okay. I see. So I think I understand what the problem is asking me to do, but let me just ask you about a couple test cases to make sure I understand.
okay.
So let's see. Let's say that this was kata. Would you expect me to return 4?
Yes, I would.
Okay. And let's say that this was empty. Would you expect me to return 0?
Yes, I would. 0 is an acceptable thing to return if you're given an empty array.
Okay, cool. So the way I would solve this is I would take chars and I would create a map from each character to the number of occurrences in chars. So for attach, the map would be like A to 2, T to 1, C to 1, H to 1.
Okay.
And then for each word in words, I go through the characters and make sure that so I guess what I would do is so I would see C, and then I would like decrement the count in the map for C to 0. I see A, decrement to 1. I see T, decrement to 0. And because we went through the entire word and there were enough characters in the map to like satisfy that word, then I would add that word to a length. And then I would do this for every word, and by the end, the length, I would just return that.
Okay, that seems reasonable. Do you want to try coding that up?
Sure, I can do that. Okay, so we have function, and we can call this sum of lengths of valid words. And this function takes in words and also chars. So the first thing is we define a map which we can call character frequencies.
Okay.
And then we'll call a method called construct frequency map, construct char frequency map, which takes in chars.
Yep.
And then we could define a variable length. Well, I guess we should call it sum of lengths. Starts off as 0. Then we loop through for word of words. And we say if can be formed word from char frequencies. And then at the end, we return sum of lengths. And actually, the only thing we will add is we'll call a clone method here. And I'll explain a bit more why we would do that. But does this approach look good? Should I go ahead and implement some of those helper methods?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it seems like you're creating a map of character frequencies, and then for each word, you're determining if the word can be formed using the character frequencies. And then if it can be, you're just adding to it links, right?
Right.
Cool. Yeah, why don't you implement the helper functions?
Do you have any preference as far as which one I implement, or should I just do all of them?
I think, why don't we start with constructing the character frequency map?
Cool. Sounds good. So let's see that, and we'll create map. Okay, I'm assuming you can just index into a map like this, although I'm
Yep.
not 100% sure if that's right syntax.
Yep.
Do you want me to run this on an example, or does this look fine?
No, that looks good. Just the one thing you should probably put a const here. Just that's how JavaScript works. But I know you don't normally code in JavaScript, so.
And I normally have a code editor to help me out and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll implement can be formed next.
Sounds good.
And this takes in a word as well as the frequency map. Okay. For const character of word.
Mm-hmm.
If so here's what we'll do. We'll say const count available equals char frequency map of character. So there's a couple possibilities. Either this character is in the map or it's not. And if it's in the map, it could have a value of 0, or it could have a value that's positive, right? So let's consider those possibilities. So if the count of the character is not defined, that means that we can't. That means that if it's in the word, then that word could not be formed. So we'll return false in this case.
Mhm.
And then the other case is if count available is equal to 0, because that means we don't have any more of that character available to be consumed, I guess you could think of it. And we'll return false. And then in all other cases, we will say char frequency map of character minus equals 1. That's just shorthand for decrement by 1.
Yep.
And then assuming it goes through this entire for loop without returning, then we know that we can form the word.
Okay.
Does that seem okay, or do you want me to run it through an example?
Yeah. Why don't we run it through a short example? Like, why don't we just take this ATACH and run it through an example of cat and tree?
Cool.
So we'll just do it right here on line 26. I'm going to write cat, and I'm going to write tree. And we would expect this to return 3, because using ATACH, we can form the word cat, and we cannot form the word tree. Do you agree?
Are you asking me to test the entire function or just the can be formed function?
Why don't you just test the can be formed function?
Okay, so for the can be formed function, it would be like a single string as input here, and then a map as the second input.
Yep.
Okay, so the map for this specific chars would be like A to 2, T to 1, C to 1, H to 1.
Yep.
So if the word is cat, in line 53, the for loop, the first iteration of the for loop character is C. And when we look that up in the frequency map, we get count available as 1. And so that's not undefined. So we skip 55, we skip 58, and then we decrement. So now the count is set to 0 for C.
Yep.
The next iteration is A. So when we look up A, we find that it's set to 2. And then we skip 55, we skip 57, and we decrement it to 1. So now A points to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third time around the for loop will be for the character T. And then so the count we find for T will be 1. We skip 55, we skip 58, and we decrement. So now it's 0. And then now we're done through the for loop. So then we can just return true.
Yep.
And for the other example, which was tree, I think.
Tree, correct. And
Okay.
just for other people's reference, I'm just going to create the map here real quick. T points to 1. C points to 1. And H points to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right. So then for tree, and then tree is the first argument. We look at T first in the for loop, and then we get the frequency as 1. And then we skip over line 59 and line 62, and then we decrement the frequency from 1 to 0.
Mhm.
Then we look at R, and then when we look up in the char frequency map for R, well, we don't have an entry for R. So it will, when you don't have an entry in a map and you try to look it up, you get undefined, which is like a special value which indicates nothing's there. So then we would enter line 59 and return false, which is what we'd expect for the behavior.
Right. Cool. Yeah, this problem was very well done. I think you nailed it.
Do you want me to implement clone?
Yes, definitely. Or could you explain the need for it?
Sure. So I'll just show you what would happen if we didn't have clone here. If we had our function set up like this, well, we create our char frequencies map, which is the map from each character to its frequency. And then we call can be formed passing in the same char frequencies map for each word in the words array. The problem is that this function can be formed along with checking whether the word can be formed. It's actually modifying the contents of the char frequencies map. And that's because the way it's checking the word can be formed is like it goes through each character and decrements the count in the map. So what would happen is like, so how do we get around this problem? Well, we create a copy of the frequencies map for each time we call this function so that the function doesn't modify the underlying map data structure.
Yep. I see. Because you don't want to be overriding the values.
Right. And I think this would, well, actually, let me fix this. I think this would do it, but I'm not very familiar with JavaScript. I'm assuming that this syntax, const char frequency map, is iterating over the keys of the frequency map.
Yeah, so it's actually when you iterate over a map, you're going to use in.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So now that will do the trick then.
Yep. Yeah, that looks really good. You nailed it. How did you find this problem difficulty-wise?
I mean, it's not trivial, but the key thing would be like being familiar with the data structures and how to use them. Like knowing that you want to be using a map to keep track of the character frequencies, knowing that's the first step, and then you can use that frequency map to determine whether those words can be constructed.
Yep. Cool. Well, I can definitely say if I was running a boot camp, I would want you in it.
That's good to know.
Cool. Sounds good. I think we'll wrap it up now, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So that's the mock interview. Great job to Daniel. If you liked watching this, please leave a comment so that I know, so maybe I can post more mock interviews in the future. Also, if you have any questions, you can leave a comment, or you can also message me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any comments or questions that you have. Peace.
back when I can, just playing my part.